The bell above the cafe door jingled as the morning rush faded. The place smelled of roasted beans and warm bread, sunlight spilling through the wide front windows onto polished wooden tables. Isabella Reed wiped down the counter with steady hands, though her shoulders ached from another long night. The cafe wasn't much. 4 tables, a humming old espresso machine, a chalkboard menu with hand-drawn swirls of pastel chalk. But it was hers. Hard-won, fragile, and a world away from the one she had left behind. Behind the counter, a small voice chimed. "Mommy, I helped fold the napkins." Grace came skipping out from the back room, 7 years old, her curls bouncing, her apron 2 sizes too big. She carried a stack of napkins pressed to her chest like treasure. Isabella smiled despite herself, kneeling to take them. "Perfect job, sweetheart. You're my best helper," Grace beamed, her gap-toothed grin brighter than the sun outside. "I'm your only helper," she teased, making Isabella laugh softly. The cafe was quiet now. Only a few regulars sat by the window, sipping coffee and murmuring over newspapers. Outside, the sleepy town drifted by. Children on bikes, shopkeepers unlocking doors, the distant chime of the church bell. Grace climbed onto a stool at the counter, swinging her legs. She propped her chin on her hand, watching her mother pour milk into a steaming cup. "Mommy," she asked suddenly, "why don't I have a daddy?" The milk pitcher stilled in Isabella's hand. For a second, the hiss of the espresso machine was the only sound between them. Her throat tightened. She forced her hand to move again, pouring, steadying her voice. "You do have one, Grace." Grace tilted her head. "Then where is he?" "Everyone else's daddies come to school plays, or pick them up sometimes. Why doesn't mine?" Isabella set the cup down carefully, her smile faint, brittle at the edges. "He had to go away a long time ago, but you have me. And that's enough, isn't it?" Grace frowned, her innocence cutting through like glass. "But yeah, do you miss him?" The question pierced deeper than Isabella expected. She turned, wiping her hands on a cloth, avoiding her daughter's eyes. "Some things are better left in the past, baby." Grace didn't press, but her silence was louder than words. The hours passed. Isabella busied herself with refilling sugar jars, wiping tables, stacking pastries in the glass display. Grace hummed to herself as she drew pictures on scraps of paper. Flowers, stars, stick figures holding hands. One drawing caught Isabella's eye. A little girl, a mother, and a tall man beside them. A family. She swallowed hard, folding the drawing quietly when Grace wasn't looking. By afternoon, the cafe had emptied again. Sunlight slanted lower through the windows, painting golden rectangles on the floor. Isabella leaned against the counter, exhausted but content. Grace chased dust motes through the light, giggling. The quiet felt safe, predictable, until the doorbell jingled. At first, Isabella didn't look up. Another customer, she thought. Another order of coffee or tea. But then the air changed, heavy, sharp, pulling her chest tight. She looked up and froze. A man stood framed in the doorway, tall, broad-shouldered, his presence swallowing the space around him. His suit was dark, tailored, far too fine for this quiet street. A scar ran faintly along his jaw, his black hair streaked with silver, his eyes cold and unreadable. Time slowed. The tray in Isabella's hand slipped, clattering against the counter. It had been years since she'd last seen him, years since he vanished into the shadows of a world she swore she'd never touch again. But no amount of time could erase his face from her memory. Dario Bianchi. Her breath caught. Grace, curious, turned from her game and stared at the stranger. Her big brown eyes blinked once, twice. Then without hesitation, she ran forward, her voice bright and innocent. "Daddy?" The cafe fell silent. The regulars at the window froze mid-sip. Isabella's heart stopped in her chest. And Dario, the man who had disappeared years ago, the man whose shadow had haunted her every night, stood in the doorway, his expression flickering for just a second. Shock. Recognition. Something deeper. The air was thick enough to choke on. The man she had loved, the man who had left her, now standing in her cafe, and her daughter had just spoken the word that shattered everything. Daddy. The word hung in the air like shattered glass. Daddy? Grace's voice was clear, innocent, unknowing. The cafe went silent. Even the hum of the espresso machine seemed to vanish. A regular at the window lowered his newspaper, staring. Another paused with his cup halfway to his lips. Isabella's heart thundered. She shot forward, her hand seizing Grace's arm before the little girl could take another step. "Grace," she whispered sharply, her voice trembling. "Come here." But Grace only tilted her head, eyes fixed on the man in the doorway. "Mommy, isn't that him?" Dario Bianchi stepped fully inside. The door closed behind him with a quiet click, sealing the cafe in heavy silence. He hadn't changed. Not truly. Yes, the streaks of silver in his black hair, the fine lines carved deeper into his face, the scar along his jaw that hadn't been there before. But his presence, that commanding gravity that seemed to pull the air toward him, it was exactly as she remembered, maybe stronger. His eyes, dark and unreadable, moved slowly from Isabella to the girl beside her. They flickered, just for an instant, at the word that still seemed to echo in the room. "Daddy." Then his expression returned to stone. Isabella forced herself to breathe. She crouched, pulling Grace against her. "Sweetheart, go to the back. Now." But, now. Isabella's voice cracked sharper than she intended. Grace's lip trembled, confused, but she obeyed, scampering through the curtain to the kitchen. The room exhaled with her absence, but the damage was already done. Isabella rose, her eyes burning into the man she had once loved. Her voice was low, harsh, trembling with fury she had buried for years. "What are you doing here?" Dario's gaze held hers. Calm, unshaken. "This is your cafe," he said softly, his voice still carrying that smooth edge, like velvet wrapped around steel. "I wanted to see it." Her laugh was sharp, bitter. "You don't get to just want anymore." He took another step, the click of his polished shoes echoing on the wooden floor. "I had to know." "Know what?" Her hands clenched at her sides. "That I survived without you? That I built this life from nothing while you vanished into the shadows?" His jaw flexed, but his tone stayed steady. "That you were safe." The words burned more than soothed. "Safe?" Isabella spat. "Do you have any idea what you left me with? I woke up alone, Dario. I carried her alone. I raised her alone. And all this time you were out there, what, killing, dealing, building your empire?" She stepped closer, her voice rising. "Don't you dare stand in here and talk about safety." The cafe regulars looked away, uncomfortable, sensing the storm between them, but unable to leave. Dario's eyes darkened. "You think I left because I wanted to?" "You did," she snapped. "You chose your world over me. Over us." His silence was heavy. For the first time, something flickered in his eyes. Guilt, regret, or perhaps something she couldn't yet name. Then he said quietly, "I chose survival." Her breath caught, rage warring with the ache in her chest. "And what about her? She's never even had the chance to know her father." At that, Dario's gaze shifted toward the curtain Grace had disappeared behind. His jaw tightened, his composure cracking just slightly. "I didn't know," he said, his voice lower now, rougher. "Not until just now." Isabella froze. "You mean to tell me?" She laughed bitterly, her voice breaking. "You didn't even think to check. You left me without a word, without asking if I was—" Her throat closed. She forced herself to steady. "You don't get to be shocked now." Dario's shoulders straightened, his face hardening again. "And yet here we are. The past doesn't stay buried, Isabella. It always comes back." Her chest burned at the sound of her name on his lips. She shook her head, gripping the counter for balance. "You can't just walk in here after years and expect nothing," he interrupted, his voice sharp, commanding. "I didn't come for forgiveness. Then why?" Her voice trembled. He held her gaze unyielding. "Because the moment I walk through that door, others will know. And once they do..." His eyes flicked again toward the back room. "Grace is no longer hidden." The words landed like a blade. Isabella's knees weakened, but she forced herself to stay upright. "You stay away from her," she hissed. "Do you hear me? You don't get to say her name. You don't get to look at her. She's mine. Dario's lips curved, not in a smile, but something colder. Yours? She carries my blood. Blood doesn't make a father, Isabella snapped. Showing up does. And you... Her voice broke, hot tears threatening. You never did. For a moment, silence. The fire between them burned hot, dangerous. Then Dario stepped closer, lowering his voice, every word laced with quiet menace. And yet, now I have a daughter. Isabella's heart stuttered. Dario leaned in just enough for only her to hear. The world I left behind will already be sniffing this out. Rivals, enemies, men who would burn this cafe to the ground just to hurt me. And when they do, Isabella, his eyes bored into hers, sharp as glass, they will not stop at you. They will take her. Her blood ran cold. He straightened, adjusting his jacket, his expression returning to the stone mask she remembered. That's why I'm here. Not for you, for her, the curtain rustled. Grace peeked out, eyes wide, holding her drawing of the family she'd sketched earlier. Mother, child, and a tall figure beside them. Her innocent voice cut through the tension. Mommy, is he really my daddy? Isabella's chest constricted, and Dario's dark eyes finally cracked, just slightly as he looked at his daughter, for the first time. The sound of Grace's question still echoed in Isabella's chest long after she tucked her daughter into the back room with crayons and whispered, Promises. Is he really my daddy? Her hands trembled as she wiped the counter again and again, though the surface was already spotless. She could still feel his presence lingering in the cafe, heavy as smoke, and with it came memories she had tried for years to bury. She had been 21 then, young, bright-eyed, working double shifts between school and the small trattoria on the edge of the city. He walked in one night, not in the tailored suits she saw now, but in a leather jacket, his hair longer, his jaw unscarred. Even then, though, he carried that same weight, that aura of danger. The other waitresses whispered when he sat down. Dario Bianchi. Trouble. Don't even look at him too long. But when he caught Isabella's eyes across the room, she hadn't looked away. Later, when she brought him his espresso, he smiled faintly. What's your name? Isabella, she had said, her voice steadier than she felt. Isabella, he repeated, rolling it off his tongue like he was testing it, tasting it. Beautiful name. It started with late-night conversations after her shift. Him walking her home, even when she insisted he didn't need to. Him asking questions no one else bothered with. Her favorite books, her dreams, why she liked to paint in her spare time. It grew into secret dinners, stolen kisses in alleyways lit by street lamps, the kind of passion that burns too bright to last. She knew who he was, or at least she thought she did. She knew the whispers, mafia blood, dangerous company, a man with enemies in every shadow. But when he touched her, when his rough hands cradled her face like she was something fragile, none of that mattered. They had lain in her tiny apartment one night, tangled in sheets, the city glowing faintly outside the window. She had asked, half teasing, half desperate, Will you ever leave this life? He was silent a long time, his fingers tracing idle patterns along her arm. Then he said, For you, maybe. Her heart had leapt, but she should have heard the lie in the word maybe. It was raining the night he left. She remembered the way the drops hit the glass like tiny fists, the way the air smelled of wet asphalt. He stood in her doorway, his eyes darker than she'd ever seen. What's wrong? She had asked, her chest tight. They know, he said simply. Her stomach dropped. Who? My enemies, his jaw clenched. If they know about you, Isabella, they will use you, and I won't allow that. She had grabbed his arm, panic flooding her. Then stay. We'll figure it out together. He shook his head, pulling away. You don't understand. If I stay, you die. That's how this ends. Her voice had broken. Then don't you love me? He had looked at her then, something raw in his eyes, something unspoken. And then he had kissed her. Desperate, searing, final. When he pulled away, his voice was a whisper. That's why I'm leaving, and he was gone. Weeks later, Isabella had stared at the test in her trembling hand, her heart pounding so hard she thought it might burst. Pregnant. She had sat on the bathroom floor, knees pulled to her chest, whispering his name over and over like it was a curse and a prayer. But she never told him. She raised Grace alone, pouring every ounce of her strength into giving her daughter the life Dario's world could never offer. Every night she promised herself the same thing. He will never walk back through that door. And if he does, I won't let him in again. Now, standing in her cafe years later, Isabella's reflection glimmered faintly in the window glass. Older, stronger, but with the same ache in her chest she'd carried since that night. She gripped the counter until her knuckles whitened. The doorbell jingled. Again, a customer entering, but her eyes stayed fixed on the place where Dario had stood earlier. Her voice was a whisper. Only she could hear. You don't belong here anymore. But deep inside, a quieter voice whispered back. And yet, he always will. The cafe was nearly empty now. The two regulars had left quietly, sensing the storm in the room. The bell above the door no longer jingled with customers, only with dread. Isabella stood rigid behind the counter, her arms braced against it, as though it was the only thing holding her up. Dario remained across the room, a figure of dark calm, his presence filling the silence like smoke. Between them, the curtain fluttered, and Grace peeked out, clutching the drawing she had made earlier. Her little voice broke the silence. "Mommy, is he really my daddy?" Isabella's throat closed. Her daughter's eyes, wide and trusting, turned from her to the man across the room. Dario's gaze softened almost imperceptibly at the sight of her. But Isabella stepped forward, intercepting, her voice sharp. "Go back to the kitchen." "But now," Isabella snapped, her voice shaking. Grace's lip trembled, but she obeyed, retreating behind the curtain, leaving her drawing abandoned on the floor. The silence that followed was worse than shouting. Isabella turned on Dario, her voice low, furious. "You don't get to look at her." Dario's gaze lingered on the curtain where Grace had disappeared, then returned to Isabella. His tone was calm, measured. "She looks like you." The words struck like a blow. Isabella's nails dug into the counter. "Don't you dare!" Dario tilted his head, his expression unreadable. "She is mine. She is not yours." Isabella's voice cracked, louder now. "She is mine. I carried her. I raised her. I built her life with my bare hands while you—" Her chest heaved. "While you vanished," Dario's jaw flexed. He stepped closer, his presence sharp as a blade. "And yet she carries my blood. Blood?" Isabella laughed bitterly, though it sounded closer to a sob. "Blood doesn't make a father. Showing up does. And you never did. For the first time, something flickered across his face. Guilt. Or maybe pain. But it was gone as quickly as it appeared. "I left because if I stayed, you would be dead," he said, his voice low, rougher now. "Do you think I walked away easily? Do you think I didn't want to hold you every night to wake up and see—" He stopped, jaw tight. "Do you think I wanted this?" Isabella's eyes burned. "You had a choice, and you chose them. Your world, your empire. Don't you dare stand in here and act like it was sacrifice. You abandoned us." Dario's lips pressed into a line. "I protected you the only way I knew how." Her laugh was bitter, broken. "Protection. Do you know how many nights I cried myself to sleep? How many times she asked me why she didn't have a father? I told her stories, Dario. I lied for you. I made you into a hero so she wouldn't hate you." Her voice cracked. "But I hated you." The words landed heavy, but Dario didn't flinch. He only stepped closer, his shadow stretching across the cafe floor. "You can hate me," he said softly, "but don't lie to yourself. You loved me then, and part of you still does." Isabella's chest tightened, fury and grief colliding. Don't you dare stand here and try to use love like a weapon." His voice lowered, dangerous. "It's not a weapon. It's the truth. And the truth is—" He glanced again toward the curtain where Grace had gone. "She changes everything." Isabella's heart thudded painfully. "You don't get to claim her." "I'm not claiming her," Dario said. His tone shifted, softer but edged with steel. "I'm warning you. The moment I stepped through this door, the moment I was seen with you, whispers began. Men are already talking. Enemies are already watching. Her stomach dropped. He stepped closer, lowering his voice. Grace is no longer hidden. And when they learn she is mine, his eyes bore into hers. They will come for her. Isabella froze, her blood running cold. He continued, calm, merciless, rivals, old debts. Men who couldn't touch me before will see her as leverage, a way to break me, a way to own me. Her hands shook. Stop, don't say it. It's already true, Dario said. You think this cafe, this quiet little town, can shield her? The moment my enemies smell blood, no door, no lock, no wall will keep her safe. Not without me. Tears welled in Isabella's eyes, but she refused to let them fall. She lifted her chin, defiant. I kept her safe for 7 years without you. I'll keep her safe for 70 more. Dario's gaze sharpened. You can't. Her voice trembled with rage. Watch me. They stood in silence, 2 storms colliding. Then Grace's voice floated from the back, soft and curious. Mommy? Both froze. Can Daddy stay for dinner? Isabella's throat closed. Dario's eyes flickered, the faintest crack in the mask. For just a heartbeat, the cold Mafia boss was gone, and in his place stood the man she once knew, but only for a heartbeat. He straightened, his voice low, final. You can hate me, Isabella, but you can't erase me. Not anymore. Because whether you want it or not, his gaze burned into hers. I'm already here. The sun had sunk low, painting the cafe windows in streaks of gold and shadow. The place was empty, chairs flipped onto tables, the smell of coffee and sugar lingering in the air. Isabella stood at the counter, wiping down the same surface for the 3rd time. Dario hadn't left. He sat at a corner table, silent, his jacket draped over the chair, his presence as heavy as iron. His dark eyes tracked the street outside, sharp and restless. Every time Isabella's gaze strayed toward him, fury clawed at her chest. He didn't belong here, not in her cafe, not in her world, and yet, here he was, like a storm cloud refusing to move. Grace's laughter broke the tension. She sat on a stool at the counter, coloring her abandoned drawing, now adding bright purple dresses and yellow suns to the stick figures. She looked up at Dario, beaming. Do you want to color too? She asked innocently. Isabella nearly snapped. But Dario surprised her by leaning forward slightly. His voice was quiet, rough around the edges. I don't remember how, Grace giggled. That's okay. I can teach you. She slid a crayon across the counter toward him. For a long moment he stared at it like it was a foreign object. Then slowly he picked it up, the sight, Dario Bianchi, the man who once terrified half of Naples, holding a purple crayon, made Isabella's chest twist painfully. But her moment of weakness vanished when she noticed movement outside. 2 men lingered across the street, leaning against a lamppost. Their jackets were too heavy for the weather. Their eyes kept darting toward the cafe. Her breath caught. She turned sharply toward Dario. Your shadows are already here. He glanced outside, his jaw tightening, but his expression remained calm. I know, you know, Isabella hissed. And you sit here coloring while men circle my daughter's home? Dario set the crayon down neatly, rising to his full height. I've already placed men at every corner. No one gets near her. The casual certainty in his tone chilled her more than the danger outside. Later that evening, Isabella tried to close the cafe as usual. She dimmed the lights, stacked chairs, pulled down the blinds. But when she went to lock the front door, she froze. A folded piece of paper had been slipped beneath it. Her hands trembled as she picked it up. In rough handwriting, scrawled across the page, "We know about the girl." Her blood ran cold. She whirled on Dario, who was already moving toward her. He plucked the note from her hands, reading it once, his face unreadable. Then he tore it cleanly in half, dropping it into the trash. "It's begun," he said simply. That night, Grace insisted on staying up late. She sat cross-legged on the floor, watching cartoons, while Isabella tried to convince her to go to bed. "Just one more, Mommy," Grace begged. Isabella sighed, brushing her daughter's curls back. "Fine. One more." Behind them, Dario stood by the window, watching the street with the intensity of a soldier waiting for battle. Grace noticed him, her head tilting. "Why do you stand like that?" Dario glanced at her. "Habit. From what?" "From a life I don't want you to know," he said quietly. Grace blinked, then smiled, unbothered. "You should sit. Sitting is better." For the first time that night, Isabella saw something crack in him, a faint, fleeting smile that vanished almost as soon as it appeared. When Grace finally drifted to sleep, Isabella pulled a blanket over her and turned on Dario. "This is exactly what I warned you about," she hissed. "Notes under the door. Men in the street. My little girl is being dragged into your world, and I will not allow it." Dario's eyes burned into hers. "It's already too late." "No." Her voice trembled, but she stood firm. "If you walk out that door tonight, if you disappear again, maybe we can still keep her safe." Dario shook his head. "They've seen me here. They've seen her. There's no undoing it. The only safety now..." He stepped closer, his voice dropping to steel. "Eyes with me," Isabella's chest heaved. "You don't get to decide that." "I do," he said flatly. "Because you don't understand the wolves at your door." "But I do. I've been one of them all my life." Before she could answer, glass shattered. The cafe window exploded inward, a brick clattering across the floor. Isabella screamed, instinctively shielding Grace's sleeping form. Dario was already moving, gun in hand, shoving Isabella behind the counter. He scanned the street, every muscle taut, a predator ready to strike. Isabella's heart hammered. She clutched her daughter tightly, whispering frantically, "It's okay, baby. It's okay." Though she knew it wasn't. Dario stepped back from the window, his voice low and cold. "It's a message." He bent, picking up the brick. A second note was tied around it, smeared in ink. He tore it open, reading aloud. "The girl belongs to us now." Isabella's breath caught. Her knees nearly buckled as she pulled Grace closer. Dario's eyes darkened, the mask of calm finally breaking. He crushed the note in his fist, his voice like thunder. "Not while I'm still breathing." Night pressed heavy against the cafe windows, the kind of silence that felt unnatural. Even the crickets outside had stilled. Isabella sat curled on the couch in the back room, Grace tucked in beside her, finally asleep. She brushed her daughter's curls from her forehead, her chest aching with a fear she couldn't voice. In the front of the cafe, Dario hadn't moved for hours. He stood by the window, gun holstered at his side, his gaze fixed on the street like a wolf waiting for the first flicker of movement. His presence filled the space, solid, immovable, terrifyingly calm. Isabella hated that a small part of her felt safer because of it. The first sound was faint, a crunch of gravel. Dario's head tilted slightly, every muscle coiled. His hand went to his gun. Isabella's heart lurched. "What is it?" she whispered, clutching Grace closer. "Stay down," Dario ordered, voice low and sharp. Then the world shattered. The cafe's front window exploded inward. Glass spraying across the floor like glittering shrapnel. Black-clad figures surged through the opening, masks covering their faces. "Guns raised," Isabella screamed, diving over Grace, shielding her with her body. The gunfire began. The sound was deafening. Bullets cracking, wood splintering, the espresso machine erupting in sparks. Dario moved like a storm unleashed. His pistol was in his hand, shots precise, each motion practiced and lethal. One intruder fell, then another, bodies crashing onto broken glass. "Go," he barked at Isabella without looking back. "Get her to the kitchen." Isabella scrambled, dragging Grace with her, but her legs trembled, her breath ragged. She ducked behind the counter, holding her daughter close as bullets tore through shelves and bottles shattered around them. Grace's sobs tore through Isabella's chest. "Mommy, I'm scared." "I know, baby, I know," Isabella whispered, voice breaking. "Just keep your head down." Dario's voice cut through the chaos, sharp, commanding. "Two more at the door. Cover the windows!" His men, Isabella hadn't even realized they were stationed outside, rushed in, engaging the attackers. The cafe was no longer a shop. It was a war zone. A masked intruder vaulted over the counter. Isabella screamed, shoving Grace behind her. The man raised his weapon. A single gunshot rang out. The intruder crumpled at Isabella's feet. Dario stood behind him, smoke curling from his pistol, his eyes blazing. He extended a hand to Isabella, his voice low but fierce. "Move." She grabbed Grace and stumbled toward the back, but Dario caught her arm. "No," he said, eyes scanning the chaos. "They want her. They'll come through every wall if they have to. You stay with me." Isabella's chest heaved. "She can't see this. She has to!" Dario snapped, his voice rough. "Because if I fall, you need to know what this world really is." The words cut like knives. But before Isabella could respond, another wave of gunfire raked the walls. Dario shoved them both behind an overturned table, firing back with brutal precision. Grace clung to Isabella, her tiny body trembling. "Is he going to kill them all?" she whispered, eyes wide with terror. Isabella pressed her daughter's face into her shoulder. "Don't look, baby. Just stay with me." But Grace peeked anyway. She saw her father standing tall amid the chaos, relentless, untouchable, moving like he had done this his entire life. And in that moment, some small part of her understood what her mother had tried so hard to hide. Her father was not like other men. Minutes felt like hours. Finally, the last intruder fell, silence crashing down in the aftermath. The cafe was destroyed. Windows shattered, tables splintered, walls riddled with bullet holes. The smell of gunpowder and blood choked the air. Isabella held Grace tight, both of them shaking. Dario stood amid the wreckage, chest heaving, his gun still in his hand. His eyes swept the room, sharp, ensuring no threat remained. Then he turned to them. For a moment, Isabella saw something raw flicker in his gaze. Not the cold Mafia boss, not the calculated killer, but a man staring at the only two people he couldn't afford to lose. He holstered his gun, stepping toward them slowly. Grace peeked up, her voice trembling. "Daddy?" The word cracked something inside him. He crouched in front of her, his bloodied hands trembling slightly as he reached out but stopped short of touching her. His voice was hoarse. "No one will ever take you from me." Isabella's throat tightened. Her fury warred with her fear, with the aching truth in his voice. "You've already brought them to her door," she whispered bitterly. "You've already destroyed everything I built." Dario's eyes locked on hers, dark and unyielding. "Then I'll burn the rest of my world to the ground. For her, for you." The cafe was a ruin. Bullet holes scarred the walls. Glass crunched underfoot with every step. The smell of smoke and gunpowder lingered like a curse. Isabella sat on the floor with Grace curled in her arms, rocking her gently, as if the rhythm could erase the nightmare they had just endured. Grace's small hands clutched at her mother's blouse. Her face buried, still trembling, Dario stood nearby, his jacket discarded, his white shirt stained with blood, not his own, but of men who had dared breach his territory. He leaned against the counter, head bowed, chest heaving as the adrenaline drained from his body. For once, he looked less like a mafia boss and more like a man, exhausted, haunted, human. Isabella's voice finally broke the silence. "This was my home." Her tone was quiet, but every word cut deep. "This cafe was supposed to be our safe place. Grace's safe place. And in one night you've ruined it." Dario's gaze lifted, his dark eyes locking on her. "They would have come whether I was here or not. My enemies don't forget. They don't forgive. Don't twist this." Isabella snapped, rising unsteadily to her feet. "You brought this to our door. You walked back into our lives and dragged your shadows in with you." Her voice cracked. "Do you have any idea what it's like to raise a child in fear that one day the past might find you?" Every knock on the door, every strange car in town, I thought, what if it's him? What if it's them? And now here you are, my worst fear, standing in my kitchen with a gun. Grace stirred, whimpering softly. Isabella crouched again, soothing her, but her eyes never left Dario. His jaw clenched. His voice was low, rough. "You think I left because I didn't care. But that's not the truth." "Then what is the truth?" Isabella demanded, her voice sharp. Because all I saw was the back of you walking away, leaving me to carry your child alone. Dario stepped closer, his shadow falling across her. For once, his voice faltered. The truth is, if I had stayed, you'd both be dead. Isabella froze, her arms tightening protectively around Grace. I had enemies even then, Dario continued. Men who would have burned this city to the ground if it meant breaking me. I thought disappearing was the only way to keep you alive. Her eyes blazed with fury. And you thought abandoning me pregnant was protection? You thought silence was love? His face cracked then. Guilt, regret, grief flickering all at once. I didn't know about her, he said softly, his gaze shifting to Grace. If I had known, you would have what? Isabella cut him off, her voice trembling. Stayed? Fought harder? Or left us anyway because the Mafia always comes first? Her voice dropped to a whisper, raw. I needed you, and you weren't there. The words hung heavy in the air. For a long time, Dario said nothing. Then slowly, he crouched to her level, his eyes dark but unflinching. You're right, he admitted. I failed you. I failed her before I even knew she existed. Isabella's breath caught, her heart pounding at the raw honesty in his tone. But don't mistake absence for indifference, Dario went on, his voice low, steady. I watched from the shadows. I made sure you never went hungry, never lost this cafe. Every quiet favor, every mysterious loan forgiven, that was me. Always me. Isabella blinked, shock rippling through her fury. You what? You thought you built all of this alone, he said, gesturing to the cafe. But I was always there, making sure no one touched you. That you never felt my world closing in. Her knees weakened. She wanted to scream at him, to reject the words. But deep down, she knew there had been unexplained mercies, sudden reprieves from bills, anonymous protection she could never trace. Tears stung her eyes. If you loved us, why not come back? Dario's gaze softened, pain shadowing his expression. Because I'm poison, Isabella. Every man who stands near me ends up dead. Every woman who loves me ends up broken. I thought disappearing was the only way to save you. Her voice cracked. And did it save me? Did it save her? Look around you, Dario. Do you see safety here? For the first time, silence fell between them without anger. Only grief. Dario lowered his gaze, his voice a whisper. I see the only thing I've ever wanted to protect. And the only thing I've ever failed. Something in Isabella's chest cracked. Against her will, she saw not the cold Mafia boss, but the man she had once lain beside, who once traced circles on her skin under the glow of city lights, who once promised maybe he'd leave for her. Her voice trembled. I don't know if I hate you more, or if I still love you. Dario's eyes met hers, raw and unguarded. Maybe it's both. A long silence stretched, broken only by Grace's soft breathing as she slept. Then quietly, Dario reached into the cabinet, finding the first aid kit. He crouched beside Isabella, taking her trembling hand. You're bleeding, he murmured. Isabella looked down, startled to see the cut along her palm, glass still embedded from when the window shattered. She hadn't even noticed the pain. Dario worked silently, carefully pulling the shards free, wrapping her hand with surprising gentleness. His touch was steady, precise. The same hands that had pulled a trigger moments ago now bandaged her wound with care. Isabella's breath hitched. The memory of countless nights together flooded back, and for just a heartbeat, she let herself remember what it was like to be loved by him. But the moment shattered with the slam of the back door. One of Dario's men rushed in, blood streaking his temple. Boss, he said urgently. They're regrouping. More cars circling. Word is spreading fast. This wasn't the main hit. It was a test. They wanted to see how strong your defenses were. Dario rose instantly, his mask of steel snapping back into place. And, the man hesitated. His gaze flicked toward Isabella and Grace. And now they know about the girl. Isabella's blood turned to ice. Dario's fists clenched. His voice was low, lethal. Then let them come. The man swallowed. Boss, they don't want the cafe. They don't even want you. They want her. The words slammed into the room like a hammer. Isabella gasped, pulling Grace closer. Her voice was a whisper, cracking with terror. "Oh, God, they're coming for my daughter." Dario turned to her, his eyes burning with a fire she had never seen before. "Not while I'm still breathing." The night was restless. Shadows moved against the cafe's broken windows like phantoms. Engines purred faintly in the distance, too many, circling like wolves waiting for the scent of blood. Dario stood at the center of it all, his men arming themselves, checking weapons, posting at every exit. The quiet little cafe was no longer a home. It was a fortress. Isabella sat on the couch, clutching Grace in her arms. Her daughter's wide eyes darted from man to man, confusion shadowing her innocence. "Mommy," Grace whispered, "why are there so many scary people here?" Isabella's throat tightened. She smoothed Grace's hair, whispering, "Because Daddy is making sure we're safe." The word slipped out before she could stop it. "Daddy." And when Grace smiled faintly, clinging tighter, Isabella's chest broke all over again. Dario approached, his dark figure looming over them. "We move tonight," he said. His voice was calm, commanding, but Isabella saw the storm in his eyes. "They'll strike again, this time harder. They won't stop until they have her." Isabella looked up, her fury trembling beneath her fear. "So this is it? You bring her into your war and call it protection?" Dario crouched, his gaze locking onto hers. "I bring her into my arms and call it survival." She flinched, torn apart inside. Hours crawled by, every minute sharp with tension. At one point, Grace insisted on setting the table with mismatched cups and plates. "We should all eat together," she said brightly. Dario actually sat with them, his massive frame awkward at the tiny table. His men shifted uncomfortably nearby, guns in hand. Grace grinned. "See, like a real family." Isabella's chest ached. The sight was surreal. The Mafia boss breaking bread with his daughter, the woman he left behind while soldiers waited for war. For a fleeting moment, she almost believed it could last, but then the silence shattered. Tires screeched outside. Headlights flooded through the shattered windows. Dozens of men poured from black cars, rifles glinting in the dark. "Positions," Dario barked, his men snapping into formation. Isabella's heart lurched. She grabbed Grace, ducking behind the counter. The first gunfire erupted. The cafe trembled with the assault. Bullets tore through walls, glass exploded, plaster rained down. Dario moved like a force of nature, commanding his men, returning fire with brutal precision. "Keep them back," he roared. "Don't let them breach the doors." His men fought valiantly, but there were too many. One intruder burst through the side door. Isabella screamed, clutching Grace tighter. Before the man could raise his weapon, Dario was there, slamming him into the wall, ending him with a merciless strike. He turned, his eyes locking onto Isabella's. "Move her. Now!" They scrambled toward the back, but another explosion ripped through the cafe. The front door blasted open, smoke and fire flooding in. Men stormed inside. Chaos erupted, Grace screamed, clinging to Isabella. Dario stood at the center, firing relentlessly, his voice a thunderous command. But even he was being overwhelmed, cut off from them by the tide of enemies. One masked man broke through, grabbing Isabella's arm, yanking Grace from her grasp. "No." Isabella screamed, fighting desperately. Grace shrieked, "Mommy!" Dario spun at the sound, his eyes blazing with fury. Time slowed. He surged forward, cutting through the crowd like a blade. Bullets grazed his shoulder, blood blooming on his shirt, but he didn't falter. He reached the intruder, tearing Grace free, pulling her against his chest with one arm while putting a bullet between the man's eyes with the other. Grace clung to him, sobbing. "Daddy!" The word fueled him, igniting something unbreakable. Dario pressed her into Isabella's arms, his voice hoarse but fierce. "Take her. Don't let go." Then he turned back into the storm. The battle raged for what felt like hours. Dario fought like a man possessed, his men falling one by one around him. Isabella crouched with Grace, shielding her eyes, whispering prayers she hadn't spoken in years. Gunfire thundered. Screams echoed, Blood soaked the cafe floor, and then silence. Smoke curled through the broken windows. Bodies littered the ground. Dario staggered back into view, his gun slipping from his hand. His shirt was drenched in blood. Too much blood. Isabella's heart stopped. He stumbled, catching himself against the counter. His eyes found hers. Not the cold, unreadable eyes of a mafia boss, but the raw, human eyes of a man who had given everything. He tried to speak, but blood flecked his lips. "Isabella." His voice cracked. "Grace." Then his knees buckled. He collapsed to the floor. Grace screamed, breaking free of Isabella's arms, running to him. "Daddy!" Her tiny hand shook his arm desperately. "Please get up, please!" Isabella fell beside them, tears streaming, her hands pressing against his wounds. "Stay with us, Dario," she sobbed. "Don't you dare leave again." The cafe floor was slick with blood and broken glass. Smoke drifted in the air, curling through the shattered windows. Isabella's hands pressed against Dario's wounds, her tears falling hot onto his chest. His breathing was shallow, ragged. "Stay with me," she begged. "Don't you dare leave us again." Grace clung to his arm, sobbing. "Daddy, please don't go. Please." For a terrifying moment, there was nothing but silence. His chest still, his eyes closed. Then, with a strangled gasp, he pulled in air. His eyes fluttered open, dark and fierce even through the haze of pain. "Still here," he whispered hoarsely. "I told you, not while I'm breathing." Isabella's sob broke into a laugh of relief. Grace buried her face against him, holding on as if her tiny hands could anchor him to life. Hours blurred into one another. Dario's men, those who survived, carried him out. Isabella and Grace rode with him, refusing to let go. The safe house was quiet, hidden away in the hills. A doctor stitched his wounds under dim lamplight, muttering about how close it had been. When it was done, Isabella sat at his bedside, Grace asleep in her lap, refusing to leave either of them. Dario stirred, his eyes opening slowly. He looked at Isabella, at the child nestled against her, and for the first time, his expression softened into something she had never seen before. "Peace." "You should hate me," he rasped. "I did," Isabella admitted quietly. Her eyes glistened in the soft light. "For a long time I hated you so much it hurt. For leaving me, for leaving her." Dario swallowed hard, his gaze lowering. "And now?" She hesitated, brushing Grace's curls with a trembling hand. Then she looked back at him, her voice barely a whisper. "Now, I see the man who nearly died to keep us safe." His breath caught. He reached for her hand, his grip weak but warm. "I don't want to leave again. Not this time. Not ever." Days passed. His body healed slowly, but his resolve hardened. The Mafia sent messages, offers, threats, but Dario ignored them all. For the first time in his life, he didn't answer the call of war. He sat instead at the cafe with Grace, letting her teach him how to color with crayons. He burned toast trying to make breakfast, making her giggle. He even fixed the broken espresso machine with clumsy hands, earning Isabella's reluctant laugh. Every day, little by little, the man who had been swallowed by shadows began to return. Not Dario the Mafia boss, Dario the father. Dario, the man she had once loved. One evening, weeks after the attack, the three of them sat in the cafe. The windows had been repaired, the walls patched, the place alive again with the hum of customers and the scent of coffee. When the last customer left, and Isabella flipped the sign to closed, Dario lingered at a table, Grace curled up against him. Fast asleep, Isabella approached quietly, watching him stroke Grace's hair with a tenderness that still surprised her. "She looks at you like the sun rises when you walk in," Isabella whispered. Dario looked up, his eyes meeting hers. "I don't deserve it. Maybe not," she said softly. Then she smiled faintly. "But she doesn't care. And maybe neither do I anymore." Silence stretched between them, heavy but not bitter. Dario's hand tightened gently on Grace's shoulder. I don't know how to be a father. I don't even know if I can be the man you deserve, but I want to try." Isabella's heart ached, but for the first time, it wasn't with pain. It was with possibility. She sat across from him, her voice steady. "Then try. Every day. That's all she needs. That's all I need." Weeks turned to months. The whispers of enemies faded. Without Dario at its helm, the old world of violence turned on itself, devouring its own. He walked away from the empire he had built, leaving it to ashes, never once looking back. Instead, he built something else, a life. One crisp morning, sunlight streaming through the cafe windows, Isabella carried plates to a table while Grace played in the corner. The bell above the door jingled. Customers filtered in, filling the room with laughter and warmth, and at the counter, Dario stood in an apron far too small for him, awkwardly steaming milk as Grace giggled at his side. When Isabella caught his eye, he smirked faintly. "Don't tell anyone the Mafia boss makes a terrible cappuccino." She laughed, genuinely, freely. The sound startled her, reminding her of who she had once been, and who she might still be. That night, after closing, the three of them sat together. Grace nestled between them. Sleep tugging at her eyes, she whispered, drowsy but clear. "We're a family now, right?" Isabella's chest tightened. She looked at Dario. For once there was no hesitation. "Yes," she said softly, stroking Grace's hair. "We're a family." Grace smiled, drifting into dreams with her tiny hand holding both of theirs. Dario looked at Isabella over their daughter's head. His eyes, once cold and haunted, now held something different, something she hadn't seen in years. "Hope," he whispered, almost like a vow. "I'm not leaving again." And this time, Isabella believed him. Thank you for staying with this story until the very end. If it touched your heart, don't forget to like and subscribe. It helps this channel grow and brings you more stories like this one. And I'd love to hear your thoughts. If you were Isabella, would you have given Dario a second chance?